Hey guys, this is Chris with Financial Fitness, and today I want to talk to you about Russia buying gold that come off the press today, of what that's all about, China's buying gold, and at the end of the video, I'm going to have Andy Schectman explain to you why Basel III is so important and why we need to be paying attention. And if you care to have gold, silver, or any precious metals in your portfolio, leave something in the comments, and I'll do my best to make sure you get the best price. Let's go. Russia has had a glut of U.S. dollars. You know why? Because we're buying oil from them, because we have shut our oil supply down. You know, our creepy old Joe has shut oil down here, so he's tugging on Putin's coattails, saying, hey, I give you some money, Mr. Putin, for your oil. So that's what's going on. We're getting our oil from over there, and now they've got a bunch of money. What do you think they're going to do with the money? They're going to take at least 20% of it and buy gold. So that's what they're doing, and they're buying 5 to 30 tons a month to not make the gold price fluctuate. Now, it's weird to start seeing this stuff come off the news. This is off this morning, and I was early in stocks, in gold miner stocks, like 2 or 3 years early, and it's just been sitting there doing nothing, and now it's starting to creep up. And the reality is those stocks are going to go up after gold goes up a little bit. They're going to go crazy. I've heard it talked about like a little dog on a leash. You know, it's kind of beside you, and then it runs ahead, and then it falls behind. So that's another way to further your precious metals holdings. And why would we want to do that? So all Russia's doing is they're taking 20% of their portfolio, just like a regular investor would do, 10, 20, to up to 50%. And they're allocating it to gold because they're printing the dollar into oblivion. We're approaching $1 trillion a month. Okay, let me say it another way. All spending is 2/5. 2/5 of spending is stimulus. Now, that's crazy. 2/5 of all spending. So how can this be? You're thinking, what? Yeah, it's fake. It's a joke. They're tricking you. Everybody's got this wealth effect. It happened the same way in Weimar Germany. It happened in Venezuela. Venezuela had the best performing stock market on the earth. It was up 59,000%. Does that sound familiar? Well, if it does, pay attention. The Central Bank of Russia has pursued this acquisition plan in a steady and incremental way. Under President Putin, acquisitions of gold were regular in the amounts of 5 to 30 metric tons per month, like clockwork, to avoid disrupting the market. They don't want to buy too much at one time. It'll make the gold spike, and then they'll have to pay more for it later. It's the same way. These other countries are doing it. Thailand, 90 metric tons. Brazil, 53 metric tons. Turkey, 8 metric tons. Countries are hoarding gold, and China being the biggest one. On average, it's about 200 tons a month in China. They claim they only have 4,800 tons, but China would lie when the truth would do better. So pay attention to what's going on. I do not want y'all to miss out on the biggest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. It's going to be crazy. And I've got a strange feeling, you know, when I go around talking to people in the public, hey, you got crypto, you got gold. No, I don't have any of that, but I got some doggy coin. The population is being tricked into buying inflationary things, holding an inflationary paper that they're printing every day. Savers or losers, never forget that. And they're taking that paper and they're buying inflationary tokens. And it's going up. They're buying it because it's going up. It's the inflation effect. It's a mental game. Take some of that money, buy something physical. Don't keep it at home. I would never keep precious metals at home. I keep them elsewhere. Andy Schectman's got a great place to put them. If you want to talk about that, put it in the description below, because in the comments below, because that's cool. It's like $40 a month. But I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to talk to you about Basel III and why this is important. I could explain it in some kind of broken redneck English, but I'm going to let Andy Schectman explain it right now.
It's the biggest development of my career, I think. The U.S. dollar since 1944 has been the only Tier 1 reserve asset in the world. It's a riskless asset if you Google what Tier 1 is. Ever since 1944, after the war, the Allies met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and anointed the dollar the world reserve currency. And it's been that way ever since, well, until 1971, when the gold tie was severed by Nixon, who closed the gold window, which will lead me to something else that I'd like to talk about in a minute. But for all intent and purposes, the dollar has been the world reserve currency, and the U.S. dollar and the U.S. Treasury, ever since 1944, have been the only Tier 1 reserve asset, a riskless asset. So when a central bank would borrow money, they would hold U.S. dollars or U.S. Treasuries as collateral against that loan. It's a riskless asset or a riskless commodity until April of 2019. It was interesting the way that it all went down, because in 2017 all of the banks were selling their gold up until 2017. But in 2017 the German Bundesbank publicly said to the world, to the U.S., we want all our gold back. Send us back our gold. And this was really strange, because the central banks were selling gold, Bitcoin was going to the moon, Dow Jones was going to the moon, gold was languishing. And the Bundesbank said, we want all our gold back. But within a month of that happening, the Dutch National Bank, the Bank of Austria, the Bank of Poland, the Bank of Hungary, the Bank of Turkey, the Bank of Austria, they all said the same thing. We want our gold back. Not just from the New York Fed, but from the Bank of Austria. Really peculiar. All these banks are repatriating their gold. The next year, 2018, those same banks bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined. They wickedly start accumulating it. Then comes 2019. Those numbers jump by 100%. So now they're massively accumulating. And oh, by the way, the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank or central bank, said to the world, we're now reclassifying gold as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset next to U.S. dollars. So there are two Tier 1 reserves, U.S. dollars and treasuries and gold. And if you look at what's happened subsequently, quietly, all of the world's central banks are accumulating gold, with the exception maybe of the U.S. You have Russia, you have China, you have all of the banks, not just the European banks, that are accumulating copious amounts of gold. And Russia and China being at the top of the class. Russia, as of this month, I believe, has actually converted more of their reserves into gold than they have in dollars. Over 25% of their reserves are in gold. They're the largest purchasers of gold in the world over the last year. Alistair McLeod believes that China has 38,000 tons of gold. That would be 5 times more than we supposedly have in Fort Knox, which hasn't been audited in 50 years. So the bottom line is simply this, is that why would the Bank of International Settlements, which is arguably the most powerful bank in the world, why would they reclassify gold as the only other Tier 1 instead of a International Monetary Fund special drawing rights or a euro or a yen or whatnot? Why did all the central banks wickedly accumulate, first repatriate, and then accumulate, and then their cohorts at the BIS said, oh yeah, by the way, gold is reclassified as Tier 1, because they were all clued into it. And I think when you put it all together and see the commercial banks and now the sovereign wealth funds, this group, the others that we talked about, the family offices, the sovereign wealth funds, the commercial banks, the central banks, they've repatriated and they've quietly accumulated, holding down the price so that they can scoop up the gold when no one's looking, holding down the price, and then after they've got it all, they'll let the price go. The price will fly. They're sitting on all the gold and silver. It's the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset, and they will be set for whatever comes next. I guess the bottom line, Chris, is I believe that gold will be central to whatever comes next. It's the only way you'll ever make someone drink the Kool-Aid ever again, because if governments have their way, they'll always choose the printing press over hard decisions, over austerity. They'd rather print their way out of these problems than tell people no food stamps, no welfare checks, no unemployment benefits. What would happen in this country? It would be, you better get a gun and you better lock yourself in your house and get in shape.